Why don't we get started, and then we can start with some introductions and some preliminary stuff.
Okay.
So, well, first of all, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight, taking some time out of your busy schedule to talk about the Veronda-Falletti Ranch, and more specifically the barns. So this is the very start of the conversation on what we want to do with the barns. So thanks for joining us here at the start of the conversation. And if you don't know me, I'm Damian Obid. I'm the manager here at Katati. We also have Ashley Wilson, who is right there with us. She's our recreation manager, and also kind of Zoom meeting facilitator extraordinaire. And then we also have some design consultants here with us tonight. So we have Mitch Connor, Peter Stanley, and David Taylor with Archeologics. They're in the Archeologics box on the web Zoom. And then we also have Christina Talbot with Quadriga, their landscape architects. So she's with us here tonight. And for those of you that you don't know, and I'll talk a little about this a little bit more later in the presentation, but we do have some licensees currently at the farm, and they're with us tonight as well. So we have Dustin DiMatteo and Jeff Kelly with Farmster, and Aishwarya with Sandy Loam, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. John DeLasso and Barbara Veronda also were nice enough to join us, the Historical Society. So welcome everybody. All right, you guys just want to go on to the next slide? We'll get this thing going.
Can we get rid of that, or is that her?
I think I'd have to keep that open to admit people if they decide to join. That's it.
It'll pop up at the top.
Yeah.
Okay, go backwards.
Yep.
Hey guys, you want to?
There we go.
Are you seeing this, Damien?
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go to the next slide.
Yeah. All right. So I think everyone here knows the property we're talking about, but in the off chance that somebody doesn't know what we're talking about, this is the Veronda-Falletti Ranch here in Katati. It's right across from City Hall. And the community center, it's bounded by West Sierra Avenue, East School Street, and El Rancho, and then some homes on El Rancho and Olaf Street on the other side. Next slide. All right, so this is the current layout of the property. And I'll just run through it real quick, which is we have an interpretive signage and some sidewalk changes there on the corner of East School and West Sierra. The ranch house itself is indicated there as number 2 on this figure. It's a little hard to see, but it's up front near West Sierra Avenue. The water tower right behind it is number 3 with restrooms, and there's currently ADA parking that's been constructed there on site. Number 4 next to the ranch house and the water tower is what we call the cafe zone with some shade seating area for mostly for educational programs that we're going to be starting. A little closer to the hub, again along West Sierra Avenue, is the children's garden and kids zone. That's number 5. We have a couple barns. There's number 6 and 7 here. That's the focus of our conversation tonight. We have some pasture areas in the back with the large grassy areas shown on this figure here. On the corner of East School Street and El Rancho, number 10 is there's a large oak tree there, as well as picnic seating and a drinking water fountain. And then number 11 is a pedestrian path that goes along El Rancho and also turns the corner and goes along East School Street to the corner of West Sierra and East School Street. And then lastly, I think I'll just point out that these the dotted blue lines are existing fences, and there's a perimeter fence, and then there's some interior fencing, mostly intended to keep livestock in certain areas, as well as delineate the kids zone and some other areas near the barns. All right, next slide. Quick history on the property. So the city bought the property in 2008 with, in part with an open space district matching grant. And as a condition of purchasing property with a matching grant, the open space district puts what's called a conservation easement on the property, which restricts the types of uses, development that can occur there in the future. So in this particular case, the conservation easement preserves it as open space for active outdoor recreation, education, and agricultural activities. It's kind of the broad overview of the conservation restrictions. So in other words, it can't be developed for housing or any other unrelated use to what is intended for as a ranch, as a demonstration ranch. We had a pause there for a bit with the recession, but in 2017, we constructed the perimeter pathway, fencing, and the picnic area at the corner of El Rancho and East School Street. A couple years later, we did an extensive refurbishment of the farmhouse. And we completely reconstructed the water tower to make it usable. And in the process of doing that, we also provided ADA or universally accessible parking adjacent to it, as well as a ground floor restroom and hand washing facilities for visitors at the ranch. This was a case, the water tower was a case where the existing water tower, it would be more expensive just to rehabilitate it. And even if we did that, we couldn't really use it for anything. So the decision was made at the time to just pull the existing one down and rebuild it to modern standards so it can be fully accessible for some of the programs that we were anticipating in the future. And then this year, City Council entered into a renewed license agreement with Farmster and added a Mamatati, or otherwise known as Sandy Loam, to operate the ranch. And well, I'll get more into that in a second. Next slide. Here's just some images of what you see today when you're out there, or what you mostly see today when you're out there. This is the top left image of El Rancho. Shows the pathway that surrounds the outside of the path, or outside of the property. You can see the existing perimeter wood fence line, and there's a galvanized steel gate, just primarily for ranch operations off of El Rancho. On Olaf Street, this is a short segment because it's surrounded by housing, but again, the perimeter fence there. From School Street, you can see the pathway continues along School Street to El Rancho behind us, and West Sierra on the other side, and then the perimeter fencing there again. And then from West Sierra Avenue, you can see the ranch house, and in the distance there, you can see the two barns. And then the primary entrance off of West Sierra. So today, left image, this is the new water tower. The image to the right is the refurbished farmhouse, ranch house. The next image in the top right is the large oak tree that was preserved at the corner of El Rancho and East School, as well as fencing around it to protect it from people getting into the drip line of the tree itself, but also you can see other features there like the interpretive sign panel. And you can't see it in this image, but there's also picnic benches and a water fountain there too. And it's open, publicly accessible, open at any time for anyone that wants to visit. The image on the bottom left is just across the street from the ranch house, which is the Church of the Oaks. You know, the architecture of that was one of the considerations as we were looking at the ranch house and the water tower refurbishment, trying to make them look like they belong together because they exist right across the street from each other. And then the bottom right image are the two barns. Again, the primary subject of what we're going to be talking about tonight. Next slide. So just big picture as we get into this conversation. Some good background just for everyone to be aware of. The conservation easement does create some limitations for what we can do on the property. We did do a structural evaluation of all the structures on the property, which we used to inform the refurbishment of the ranch house and the reconstruction of the water tower. But we also looked at the barns at that time. And There were some significant structural and other issues with the barns that limit the current usability of them and would generally prohibit public access to these buildings without significant rehabilitation. So that's sort of the current state of the barns. And then for the conservation easement, it puts a total square foot restriction on the property of 10,000 square feet. So we can't have any more than 10,000 square feet of buildings, or I think you can generally think of it as hardscape. For obvious reasons, the open space district and the city want to preserve the agricultural and rural character of the property, so you don't want to overdevelop it. So that's the limit on the square footage for the property. There's a maximum building height for the property, which is 24 feet. And if you're familiar with the water tower that's out there right now, that water tower is 24 feet tall. So that gives you a sense for the height limit for anything that we put out there. And generally speaking, any new structures must be constructed in close proximity to the farmhouse and the existing barn. So they all have to be kind of in that area of where the existing buildings are. We do have some planned programming coming up, and this is, I introduced some representatives tonight from Farmster and also Sandy Loam, but this is sort of the broad outline. Is we have some animal related education planned for this coming year, as well as agricultural or horticultural education programming. Early in the year, we do plan to start opening it up for regular, hopefully coming out of COVID and opening up for regular public tours. And we're planning to do that twice a month on Saturdays. We don't have a first day scheduled yet, but that's going to be coming up in the not too distant future. We're regularly engaging with activities with the recreation programs. So Ashley's deep involved in that and trying to coordinate things for our rec programs. And then we also have preschool field trip programs that are starting. And these are, I don't know if anyone's familiar, but we actually have the market cornered in preschools in this area. So we have Sandy Loam coordinating preschool field trips. So we're going to be starting that in the very near future here, to allow preschoolers to get on the property and interact with chickens and other agricultural type activities. And then middle and high school workshops and events are planned, as well as sort of ramping up an after school enrichment program for elementary school students. Next slide. Back one slide. All right, so that's just, so all of that before was just to give everyone some context and kind of bring everyone up to speed on where things are right now with regard to the ranch. And here's just, I'll just lead this conversation with, over the years as we've been developing the property and working with our licensees and just generally with the council and the public. These are just some ideas that have come up over the years. And it may help, solicit ideas or get people thinking about opportunities there. But these are some ideas that have come up in the past, specifically related to the barns and or how the barns could relate to the property. And certainly one of them is livestock demonstration pens, an area where the public or children can safely view animals and interact with them, and related storage and animal care facilities. So think of like, maybe a good local example is at the Sonoma County Fairgrounds. There's some barns there where there's like a central gallery and there's animals penned on either side where people can get close to them without it being dangerous, especially larger animals, and interact with them. And then the related storage and animal care facilities is like animal feed and other related animal storage and care facilities. So some things that have been talked about are like, sheep shearing and hoofing and things like that, animal care kind of activities that would be interesting for people to come see or maybe even take part in at some point, but including those types of facilities in in a livestock demonstration area. There's been conversations about educational spaces for the ranch, whether that's in a barn or a separate, like actually physically within a single barn or sort of a separate structure adjacent to the barns. That's an idea that's been floated, as well as a multi-purpose community event and meeting space, and something that could potentially include small performances or group demonstrations focused on recreation, like recreation camps, local agricultural demonstrations or events, potentially local cuisine events or education, like farm to table type things. There's been conversations about farm stands, and so, you know, if there's a farm stand, then there's storage requirements that would go with that, but that's kind of getting into some of the nitty gritty. But and then, you know, sort of integrated within all of this, there's been ongoing conversations about incorporating historical elements, either inside the buildings, you know, incorporated into the design of the buildings, potentially displays outside the buildings. So there's a lot of opportunity to integrate some of the historical elements, both in terms of architecture, but also in terms of actual historical items or informational signage, or some combination of all the above. So that's just a quick recap on some of the ideas that I've, or I should say, not just me, but all of us have collectively heard over the years related to the barns and some of the related uses of the property. And we have some slides that are going to follow that get into some of the potential look and feel of the barns, but I'll pause for a second here and just see if anyone has any questions or thoughts that they want to throw in at this point. And if you do, you can go ahead and raise your hand if you would like. And there'll be more opportunities to talk, so don't worry if you.
You should be able to just unmute and ask us to.
Yeah.
Or type in the chat.
Yep.
Damien, this is John. Is now an okay time for just a brief statement?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I love this list. I've looked at you know, what Dustin has proposed for like a 5-year plan a while back, and I think I see some of these elements in there. And I'll just say, and we can talk about it when it's appropriate, but I'll just say from the standpoint of the Cotati Historical Society, who I'm representing tonight, and Bobby Jean Veronda is also on the call, one of the descendants of the Veronda family here. So yeah, we have an interest in the first very large barn, but I think what we have talked about, which is sort of creating, and I understand the issue of the building needs work. I mean, it needs flooring. We get all that, and we've incorporated that into a draft budget, but doing some kind of ADA access that runs through the perimeter of the second room that's there, the bigger of the two rooms, with basically interpretive educational signage and also artifacts. So there's a couple actually in there, but we have a number of local chicken ranches and also the Petaluma Museum who are offering up things like that. And so that's, I guess our focus is maybe a little bit single-minded, and that's sort of the whole chicken production that took place there. But that would be kind of what we're looking for. But I think it could be designed in such a way that there'd still be a pretty good open space in the middle of that room for maybe smaller events to kind of put all of these together. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Great. Yeah, thanks, John. Brittany, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to mention for the group, our family lives on West Katati, so we're on kind of that large square block where the farm is, and we absolutely love it. It's one of the highlights of our lives is that we get to walk by it every day. A couple things I had been thinking about that I wanted to throw out, and I'm not sure if this fits within the ideas of what you guys are thinking, but there is a place in Petaluma called the Happy Dahlia Farm, I believe it's called. And I'd be happy to send some information on that. But we explored that over the summer. And there were a lot of ideas there that I thought would fit really nicely with our farm here and even in the barn areas. A couple is that in the summer, they have a lot of vendors that come out on Sundays and sell kind of their local goods. So that brings people to the area to kind of, both, I think, purchase the dahlias, but also, see what local vendors and local owners have to offer. But they also have this really wonderful space for children. It's very sensory oriented, somewhat like Montessori focused, all about, so for example, they have like a small garden maze. They have an area where you can kind of like hoe the ground and the dirt for kids. They have kind of a shaded reading area. They have a place that you can plant plants. So it's very, very tactical for children. It's a way for them to learn about farming and, kind of having their hands in the earth and just kind of being part of that entire environment, and very educational at the same time and very interactive. So I don't think that would take up a ton of space, but I think maybe the two ideas that we would love to see is the opportunity to have some sort of events where we have local vendors that are kind of tied to kind of that agricultural theme in some way. And then also a way to have something that interests the children and where they can be more interactive in that space.
Great, thank you. Yeah, actually, we're currently in conversations with the Open Space District to try to convince them that local agricultural vending or displays would be helpful in terms of promoting local agriculture, but also local food production. I think their initial thoughts around that were that unless it's produced on the property, it can't be sold from the property. But anyway, I'm optimistic that that we'll find a way to do something around that. Sounds great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Should we can get through
Right.
our part?
Hmm?
We should get through our part.
All right, you guys, Mitch and all, you guys want to get going to the next couple of slides? We'll just talk about some of the
Sure.
architecture.
Well, I'm Mitch Connor, principal with Peter Stanley here at Archeologics. And again, we have David Taylor, one of our architects, who's running the show, the images and so forth. But anyway, what I want to do, or what we want to do, is just give you a general sense of how we start to set up our approach to design, be it the buildings, the site planning, taking into account all of the the various program elements that Damien just reviewed and that all of you have given input on over these several years here. And part of our assignment usually starts with, doing research about projects that we feel have some kind of relevance to what we're trying to do here, in Katati. And we've got this wonderful example. You're probably all familiar with this. It's Pierce Point Ranch out at Point Reyes, at the peninsula. And what I'm sure, I've been here several times and have enjoyed it. And I love the history of it. And I love the way it demonstrates, what was a working ranch. And in 1985, when the ranch was really not operational anymore and the state, took over the ownership and got it on the National Register, it became an interpretive center for this particular ranch operation and maybe ranching in Western Marin County. So it's a good example of a campus, if you will, which is kind of what we're creating, you know, in Katati. And it begins to depict, or does depict, excuse me, is how a collection of buildings, when looked at in its entirety, begin to create a place. It's placemaking. And in this case, it's a community. It's a ranching community that uses these buildings to create both, you know, space needs within the building, but to also create community space, you know, in and around the building. So, you know, if you've been out there and have walked it, you know, there is a whole set of interpretive signage, wayfinding type signage that when you enter in from the parking side, which is kind of the lower right corner, and then you can see the trail system that takes you out to Tamales Point, which I guess would have similar characteristics to our site in Katati with the sort of the walking areas around our site. But you get a chance to sort of look into this, you know, what was an active ranch. And so I think it's just a great opportunity to kind of go to school on what it felt like to be in this environment and how the buildings, you know, kind of supported one another and created, you know, kind of a there out in that part of Marin County. Go to the next slide. So this is what it's like to be, you know, in that center area. You know, you get a real feel. I mean, there's a schoolhouse, dairy houses, barns, blacksmith, and other sort of auxiliary buildings, including, you know, the main farmhouse that's actually currently occupied by the park staff that, you know, take care of the actual Tamales Point area. So, but you get a sense of the scale and you get a sense of the interconnectivity of how these buildings can work together. And so this is kind of setting the stage for how we're going to look at both the architecture, but also how we're going to look at these sort of outdoor spaces, these interactive outdoor spaces. That's also very important to, you know, the Katati project. So the other thing that we're doing is, and certainly, you know, the North Bay, both Sonoma and Marin, Mendocino counties have just a wonderful inventory of barns, of agrarian architecture. It's kind of one of our, you know, pet projects in this firm of, you know, just studying this kind of form and these kinds of uses. And so, you know, we haven't locked in on anything, and we'll go through sort of an exercise as we get a little further into this, where we'll investigate, you know, what is the appropriate topology of, you know, of architecture and form and, you know, containing uses, but opening themselves up to these outdoor spaces that I was just talking about. And like I say, I mean, we can fill several sheets and books actually of you know, the agrarian building form within this region. And so we'll do some editing there, but we'll have a very robust conversation with the community about, you know, which of these, you know, is more suitable for our project, you know, in Katati. Along with that, once those forms start to settle down, then we'll get into the more granular part of the architectural assignment and a bridging over to the open space. And I'm going to turn this over to Christine here in a second. But it's the actual, you know, it's the things that you touch and the things that you get close to, you know, whether we use stone or certain kinds of wood siding, you know, and it's just, it's what makes building special, and especially in an interpretive environment where you do want to kind of get up close to it and kind of sense, you know, get a real sense of what it was about. You know, we'll study the different material selections, again, that have a sort of historical, you know, idea behind them, but also represent what we're trying to do with our project. And so we'll have an inventory and a kind of a series of palettes of building materials that we'll also review with the, you know, the city and the stakeholder groups and the public at large. So I'm going to turn this over to Christine to talk about, you know, the gathering areas, not the building spaces, although we do show it inside of probably what one of the barns could be like as a flex space, but also the sort of outdoor gathering spaces and how they can be programmed and how they can be enhanced to create activity and interaction with the visitors who come to, you know, to the ranch.
Thanks, Mitch. So I'm Christine Talbot from Quadriga Landscape Architecture. And, you know, some of the elements in the site have already been developed. We talked about, you know, like the children's garden and the cafe zone. And so we were looking at ways that we can kind of connect these areas that have already been created and really build upon that area and create flexible space that could support the programming that the community wants. And some of the ideas that were discussed were, special events and, the farm to table and these ideas. So we pulled images that were more evocative of our area with materials that were more natural with the stone and the wood and things that could be used for both children and adults that would represent the community. So these are just some ideas. Next picture, please. And again, looking at more permeable materials similar to what's there now, maybe a little more formalized. So it could be an all weather in certain areas to allow, year-round use. That's maybe a little messy, but not super messy. And, the organization of the space so that people can use various parts of the ranch for different uses at the same time. So we have programming for the daycare, we have programming for, the older kids, and they can interact or be separate. And so I think it sounds like a lot of flexibility needs to be built into this area. And so we'll be looking to you to kind of guide that for us, what those needs are. And I think Damien's going to wrap up and take some questions. Thank you.
So this last slide is getting back to the demonstration area for livestock, like the pens that you can interact with animals. This is obviously very focused on the livestock interaction part, but there's as we talked a little bit about tonight, there's a lot of other opportunities, whether it's education, events, flex spaces, and historical elements incorporated into the property. This is before we get to that slide. We'll just pause again and see if anybody has any other thoughts, especially about what we were talking about with respect to the outdoor spaces, if anything else has come up in anyone's mind that they want to share. Yeah. Art, so art into the property. I think it's a great idea.
We're allowed to, if that was the question. Yes, we can. Augustine has a question.
Go ahead and unmute yourself.
We don't know yet.
Bobby Jean, you can you should be able to unmute and ask your question. I don't know if
You can't.
No.
Oops.
Brittany, did you have another question? I see your hand is raised. You can go if you.
I had a comment, and I don't want to monopolize the conversation here, but just in the last section that was shared, I think one of the things that comes to mind to me is growing up in the Bay Area, I've certainly seen a lot of historical spaces where there's, signage and documentation and kind of talking about the history of the area, but otherwise you look at the buildings and you're not really sure what they're for, what anyone's doing with them. And I think that's kind of my fear is I don't want to see this area become that. I would love to see it be interactive. I think we have such a tight community of people, especially in this downtown area, that love to kind of congregate and use the space. That the opinion I wanted to share is that I would really love to focus on ways that we can do that and make sure that it's a very usable space that the community feels comfortable accessing or has the ability to access.
This is John. Can I go ahead and jump in again too?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
So, and thank you guys for the very first slide that came up happened to be Pierce Point Ranch. I worked out there 36 years at Point Reyes, so kind of familiar with that place. It was like, hey, I walked home again. This is great. And I will say, in the case of Pierce Point Ranch, when we developed it with all the signage, only like 2 of the buildings you can really even walk into, like the large milking barn, which was the biggest building on the property. So it was a pretty static display, but that was the intent that the National Park Service had with it. And I get conceptually where you were going with it, have things, they all interact together. And I think the biggest compliment and excitement that I've heard about the Veronda-Falletti Ranch, especially since Dustin's been there, is having the animals there. I mean, people walk there and stare and stare and giggle and laugh and absolutely love it. And I was thinking, as we're planning for the future of this site, that events need to be incorporated. Things like, we used to do a dairy day once a year out at Pierce Ranch, hugely successful. And you'd have different kinds of demonstrations going on, all related to the various ag use, but maybe some kind of, for lack of a better phrase right now, a farm day where, you actually even maybe increase the type of activity there. And I mean, it's all a delicate balance because you don't want to bring hordes of people in. We have other issues that you deal with when it comes to that, but I don't really see it getting to be that size. But having it grow and having maybe even multiple events, like maybe, once a season kind of a thing, could be a really fun activity. And I think you can incorporate, I know we're talking about the barn use, but I think you can incorporate some of that with the ag history and then have these events related to them.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think John, to your comments and also to what Brittany had said earlier, I've heard that pretty consistently through the years, that there's it's a balance, right? It's a balance between passive education and making sure that it doesn't just turn into a passive property where nothing's going on, like a museum. You know what I mean? Like, maybe I'm phrasing that wrong, but where it's alive, the property itself is alive and it engages people. And there's also the historical elements in passive education too. I've heard that in various forms over the years.
Okay, Bobby Jean, it looks like you're unmuted now. We're
Okay,
ready
let's
to
see if
hear
I
your
can,
answer.
let's see if
There
I
we
can
go.
do this thing. Oh, God love it. Terrible being old in this day and age. Anyway, there's 2 things that I would like to say, and one of them is, there's a quote, and somebody said, we'd like to demonstrate what a working ranch was. And I don't see that in this proposal. And that worries me. And considering the construction of the barns, I know you, Damien, you guys have done a wonderful job with the ranch house and with the water tower. And you really did keep them pretty much like they were. But that barn represents a lot of the barns that were in this area, just like the one that you showed us out at where John was, at Tamales or wherever that was, John. And that barn construction is very similar to many barns around in this area. And I think that it's important to keep it that way. But I don't know how to do that. I don't see that in the slides that are here. Sorry for the phone. And it concerns me. And I think the other thing that concerns me a little bit is, as wonderful as all this seems, and maybe I'm off base with this, is I don't hear the historical significance of a quote working ranch. I think that's it.
Yeah, great. Well, yeah, I think, I mean, the point
Hey
of
there.
tonight really is just to get ideas. And sorry if I spoke over somebody.
Oh, it's Dustin here. Sorry to interrupt. I really appreciated Bobby's comment there, and I'm really glad we have John and Bobby, you know, speaking on behalf and representing the Cotati Historical Society. And, you know, Bobby, I hear you loud and clear around, you know, the working ranch element of it from where it is now and where we're hoping to take it, as well as, you know, honoring some of the intended uses and actual literal uses that these barns had. I had a quick question for Bobby. I heard John earlier say in the big barn, and I was very aligned with some of the artifacts that y'all have and some of the others we might be able to glean from other museums throughout Sonoma County to honor not just Cotati's history and the Veronda-Falletti Ranch's history, your history, Bobby, but, you know, in a little bit of the Sonoma County atmosphere too. I think I heard John say something around, we've walked through the big barn and I've seen a lot of the chicken, egg cleaning equipment and wash basins and all the great stuff that's in there. I'm curious about the small barn, and forgive me for brushing up on my history. The small barn wasn't, the smaller, longer one was in fact where it was the brooder house, or at least half of it was, right? I think it'd be very important, Bobby, that you share just a brief history lesson of what I think the small barn and that significance had. I mean, I had my ideas about the big barn that were contributed through what John mentioned when we first started this property. And with the big barn, it's, you know, there's a Sebastopol Grange up not too far from here, but there's nothing south of that. And that was kind of when I first started this project. To Brittany's point, and a lot of the community feedback is creating a space large enough for people to have events, whether they're seasonal or biannual. But, you know, that lends to the largest opportunity for us to have bigger gatherings on the property. But the small barn, Bobby, please refresh my memory about what that barn had. I've seen what's in there now, but I think it'd be helpful for the rest of the community, as well as some of the contractors that we have here at the moment. Sorry to interrupt, Damien.
Do you want me to say anything, Damien, or not?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Thanks, Ashley. And also my sister Velma Veronda de Miola is here too. So there were two of us trying to figure this out and interested in this property. So as far as I know, this was a chicken ranch. Now what it was prior to that, I don't know. But this was a chicken ranch, and then it became a sheep ranch after, many years after. But historically, I would say that the chicken ranch was much more important than the sheep ranch, although that's not what you necessarily see now. And the other thing that I think that is important in relation to this, Dustin, is it was self-contained. My great aunt and uncle, neither one of them drove. So they had fruit trees, they had their garden, they had their chickens. I don't know if they had pigs, but I know they had cows. They probably did have pigs somewhere. So it was a self-contained unit, as many of these ranches were, but it also provided their livelihood. That's where they sold eggs. And anybody that ever talked to Jenny, she would say hours of how much she had to come home from school and work with the eggs and collect them and clean them and size them and pack them and get everything ready. So those things were important. And I think that along with the buildings, with that aspect of the containment of a farm is what the open space and what I always thought of it as, more than a demonstration. But, you know, I don't know how to work that into, how to make that work with all of this that we're talking about. As I look at that slide, it's on the screen now. Velma, do you want to say anything? No. She said no. I know that also Al Falletti had, he made, because he, you know, again, self-contained, he made structures so that they could dry their walnuts. I don't know if they sold them or they just gave them away, but it was still part of the farm. And the old walnut tree is still there, and that could be part of a demonstration also, that I think would be important. But most people don't know that. So
Well, thank you for that, Bobby. That is exactly what I was hoping some folks are reminded of, including myself, of the small barn and some of the other elements that you know, Veronda-Falletti stood out for. And these are things that we do want to honor, and we do want to try to bake into some of the design and the function of these buildings and just the property as a whole. So thank you so much for contributing to that.
So I did want to add one more thing, and that is the design of those barns, the two that are still there. I know they take a tremendous amount of work, but the design of those barns, you could see all over this part of the county. And the other ranch in Tamales that you showed us, that was the barns they had out there. And so to have those barns there represents that area. And I think we need to do something with the barns here that represents this area. And those two barns are really significant to me. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. Jeff, did you have a question or comment?
Well, I guess more comments than questions. But I really appreciated getting that extra background. And so, you know, when I think of a community space, like the two big things really are the design and then the operator who's actually running the space. And so I think, you know, of course, so I'm a little bit newer, I think, to the group. I came on board within the last year to really help Dustin and Farmster, you know, get into the next phase of this contract or this next phase of the project. And then, but what I've really heard and seen is that more and more this property keeps on serving the community at large a little bit more. And I think that's a really, that speaks volumes to the folks that have been involved. And it's really framed my thought of, you know, in the context of Cotati, especially downtown Cotati, there's a lot of great community spaces. There's the farmers market, you got a community center across the street, you got the downtown. And so, you know, I think at least what I've been committed to is how do we make this property sort of the highest and best use? How do we enhance the area and really enhance all the great qualities that downtown Cotati has for all the residents. But I think, you know, talking to your point about balancing, you know, the historical aspects and then how we sort of create it more into a community, more accessible to the community at large. I think, you know, the historical component can also be incorporated, as we alluded to in this presentation. There's going to be tours. And so that those will be a great opportunity for us to tell that narrative and to tell the narrative of the history and what the property was before. And so I hope, you know, in that sense, I would love to learn more about, and I know Dustin knows a lot as well, but I think that, you know, telling your story is going to be ultimately a very important part of, I think, the tours and the history of the property. So I think, A, that narrative, and then B, you know, the passive elements that, you know, John and you have been saying in, you know, in the design itself, having some of the artifacts and passive educational content. And then, you know, I know us at Farmster, we're committed to also telling the appropriate narrative as well.
Yeah. Mitch, would you mind actually going to the next slide?
Sure.
by all means, if there's more comments or questions or input anyone wants to give, please do it. But I just wanted to let everyone know that in addition to tonight, so we're very high level conceptual at this point, just trying to get all the ideas on the table that we can sort through and try to develop some initial concepts for how we want to how we want to either repurpose existing stuff or create new stuff, both physical structures and outdoor spaces. So the plan was to get the input from tonight to develop those initial concepts, and then come back for another public meeting and sort of talk through those concepts and sort of just further refine how we want to develop the physical spaces on the ranch. And of course the programming would complement that. And then once we get through the concept design phase, then we would, and we seem to have a pretty solid plan for moving forward, then we would move into design drawings and start identifying the costs and hopefully moving it towards raising the funds and getting construction. So that's the sort of the thumbnail of the next steps at this point. John, go ahead, John, if you have a comment or question.
Sure, thanks, Damien. You know, I'm trying to remember the details of the matching grant program through Sonoma County Ag and Open Space District, but remind me, because I thought you alluded to something about maximum square footage. Are we currently, at least as far as buildings go, are we currently there, or do we have space? I'm not saying we're going to build a building, but I mean, if we had space to put up, you know, a chicken coop or a this or a that kind of thing.
Yeah, we do have some space. So, you know, just in rough numbers about with the existing structures that are there today, we have about half of that space under that maximum.
Okay.
As a potential.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts?
I hope somebody, I think, looking for the Zoom link to join right now. Should I send it to her?
Somebody's asking her for the Zoom link.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Ashley, go ahead.
She's emailing. She just emailed me.
She's not trying to get in. She doesn't have the link.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just working at the same time.
All right, Mitch, you want to move one more slide? So, as I said, this is by no means the end of the conversation. This is just the very start. So, we are going to have, you know, more meetings about it as we sort of refine the path forward. And, you know, if you have another brilliant idea tonight or tomorrow morning or whenever, then feel free to email it. You can email it to me. That's my email address on the screen. It's dobit@cotatiCity.org. And welcome, Mary Jane.
I don't know. Raise your hand.
We're actually at the end of the presentation, but if you had any questions or thoughts or wanted to
down here
include something,
can you raise a hand? You might just be able to speak.
Yeah, we can hear you, Mary Jane.
Hear you, Pat. Yeah.
I didn't know if you could hear me or not. I'm not used to using Zoom. I apologize for being late. I got called away. I wanted to be here for the beginning of it. So I'm sure that John and Bobby and Velma, you know, covered a lot of these topics. But if you remember right, it was about 2.5 years ago when I brought the subject up about the Historical Society being involved in this project, because there's a lot of exciting history inside that barn. And for me, having that accessible to the public is a top priority. And I was really excited when I had the conversation with the board a number of years ago about being involved in this project and being able to be a partnership, financially and in design process with the city. So I'm glad. I know COVID slowed everything down, so I'm glad we're at this process.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks, Ed. It's pretty, I have to say, it's pretty unique to have a ranch associated with a city, and it's pretty exciting. I mean, just for me personally too, to be able to help move this forward. Hopefully have something really cool out there that everyone can be proud of.
Yeah, it's definitely, when you give people directions in the community, you tell them, to drive by the farm, they all know where it is. It's definitely something that's it's a landmark in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Mary Jane, I know you just joined us, but you can unmute yourself if you wanted to. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you had anything you wanted to say or questions you wanted to ask. And you're muted right now, so just got to unmute yourself.
I just did ask to unmute, so maybe. Oh, looks like she's getting help. There we go. We still can't hear you. Maybe you need to turn the volume up on your computer. We can't hear it.
Or you can try chatting if you want to put it in the chat space.
I do have her email address.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, Mary Jane, we can't hear you, but we can email you, or that's my email address on the screen. You can email questions.
Yeah, your sound isn't coming through. We see you talk. We saw you talking, but we couldn't hear anything you said. I don't know if maybe your volume was down on your
It'd
device.
be probably the microphone.
Yeah.
The mic. Yeah. All right. Hey, Ashley. So why don't you shoot me? Actually, go ahead and shoot me Mary Jane's email, and then and I'll reach out to her and we can get you.
I will.
Yeah. All right. No, there's always some sort of. All right.
Wouldn't have been a Zoom call without it.
It would not be. All right, guys. Well, unless there's any other final thoughts before we conclude tonight. Like I said.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Because of the number of artifacts that are in there, I know Prue labeled a bunch of them, but we've never, as the Historical Society, made a formal inventory of what's in there. Would that be helpful if we were to go ahead and do that for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take on that project.
That'd be fabulous. Yeah, thanks, Ed. Great.
Hey, Ed, I have no problem. Dustin here from Farmster. I have no problem helping you guys with that inventory whenever you guys need, okay? You guys got my contact info.
Okay, yeah, maybe after the holidays over, first of the year, we'll get in touch and we'll make it happen.
Yes, sir. Sounds good. Last thing for me is I'm just really grateful, City of Cotati Historical Society, for legging this up and setting this opportunity for Farmster to come in and do what we've been able to do over the last few years. I know COVID really took a lull on things, so any other public or community members that have any feedback or ideas. Brittany, you had tons of fabulous ideas. We're always open to trying to build this to the best demonstration farm it can be, with education and the history in mind. So feel free. We have a Facebook page at Farmster. You can email me directly at dustin@farmster.org. I give you my cell phone, but we're on public channels, so we'll all connect. And just thank you all for making this possible for us.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate everyone's time. I know it's, especially a busy time of the year to take an hour out of your day to join us and have kind of get this conversation started. So thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Damien, thanks all.
Good night, everybody.
Have a great night, everybody.
Bye.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
We